What I don't know what anybody else is, quite truthfully, but what I will tell parents is rarely, 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 rarely ever would I be able to do a comprehensive evaluation for $2,500 and under. That's just so rare. Then the typical is about $3,500. It can easily go to $4,500 depending. I just gave an estimate for LA Unified School District on a child to review the files and to do a comprehensive eval, and it was close to $5,000 because that child is an Asperger's child who is brilliant and at the same time is a perfectionist. So I know that that person is going to take forever to test because because of the brilliance. That means we have to administer an enormity amount of items, as well as the fact that they're going to contemplate each response before they give it. And so that's very expensive. And then when Lynn talked about that a lot of parents, well, that she will often recommend that the evaluator also go and look at other classrooms, the proposed placements and things like that. That's not included in the figures that I just mentioned because that's above and beyond what an IEE is. Even when even when the school district will contract with me, let's say to do an IEE, they're not going to pay for me to go view proposed placements because they don't care. That's the parent. And so even on an IE like that, the parent still will be paying me to go and look at proposed placements or things like that because that's just not part of it, the typical IEE. Now, let's see, just doing quick cleanup on some things. I forget what sparked this in my mind from the last meeting here. It's very interesting. This is in typical parents with children with autism are not a medication-oriented group, as far as wanting to medicate their kids. But it is interesting to me that a parent will have a harder time medicating a child than they will in putting a child in a behavior program that they're not sure about. And to me, medicating a child is so much easier because if we take away the medication, there are no side effects. That's it. Whatever side effects were there go away. The most absolute dangerous thing that a parent or teacher or anybody could do is to put somebody in a bad behavioral program. And the reason is because what's reinforced can be reinforced for a good period of time, and then you say, oh, the program was bad, let's remove the bad program. The behaviors that were just reinforced are still there. So to me, it is much, much more dangerous to fool around and muck around with a bad behavioral program than it is a bad psychiatrist in giving medication because of the long-term side effects profile of each. So that's just some quick cleanup. Okay, what we're going to go over in the next whatever is three things. Examiner's recommendations, placement decisions from an examiner's perspective, and then some of the services. This sounds a little funky. Is this okay? The mic, you're able to hear it okay? Okay. I hate hearing my voice on recording anyway. That's why I'm hoping that they're going to improve on it. But, okay. In developing each child's IEPs, this is actually coming from the code, federal code, and it is not quoted exactly. The IEP team has to consider a child's strengths, child's academic, developmental, and functional needs. That line is the key line that we're going to be coming back to in a second. Parents' concerns, child's education, evaluation results. So the two things I want to focus on here is this one here and then this one just for a moment, because I consider those to be critical for this particular population, and you need to somehow communicate with the examiner that you're wanting the examiner to address these things in your report, and I'll explain why in a minute. So, again, we went over a little bit ago. It's important that we don't rely on the examiner to ask the right questions here. So what we're going to go into is what I need you all to do for your examiners is to develop a list of your concerns and put them in writing, and then give them to your independent examiner and ask your examiner which of those that he or she can address, and in the report, and especially if they can make recommendations about those things. Because again, we won't necessarily ask the right questions, so just give it to us. Just tell us what it is that you want us to do. Now, by law, it has to be made a part of the IEP, your concerns. And so if you make a list of those concerns and give it to us, we'll write that. We should write that into the report because to be made part of the IEP. And then it becomes memorialized once we've written it in that way. So Now, in the report, the examiner should address some or most of the concerns. We might not be able to because it depends on what our areas of expertise are. I do get a lot of behavioral questions from parents that their concerns are about behavioral issues. When I say behavioral, I'm talking about that I think really belongs to a behaviorist. And I don't field those because it's not my area of expertise. Do I understand the field? Yes. But especially if we're getting to the point that this is an IEE and it may be going to due process, I try to stay, and you want your examiner to stay, within their area of expertise that they can truly testify to. Because if they write about anything in the report, they're going to have to testify to it as if they were an expert, and they shouldn't have to, if a part of what they write has to be watered down, then it would cause any hearing officer or judge, it would cause me, if I read the report, to wonder how many of the other things that I should water down that the individual says as well. So behavioral things, you may have to, if you're looking for a behavioral evaluation, then you're not really looking for, you're looking for an IEE, an independent educational evaluation, but you're not looking to it from someone like myself, a psychologist or a neuropsych. Then you need to go to a behaviorist who may be a psychologist, but their specialty is behaviorist. Is this going? I'm hitting the wrong buttons here, but that's okay. Okay, the examiner has to be, we have to be prepared to defend our recommendations on the stand, but all of our recommendations don't need to be relating to FAPE, and this is the part that's very misunderstood. And I know someone asked a question about, but what if the IEP team doesn't adopt the examiner's recommendations? I don't pretend that all my recommendations have to do with FAPE, especially if I'm going to be recommending. What if I'm going to be recommending to a parent that hasn't begun the process of seeking some of the DAN doctors and looking at some of the biomedical interventions? If I write that into a report, I don't know that that has anything to do with FAPE, but it's still going to be a recommendation that I'm going to be making and into the report. And so when I make my recommendations, I really do make every recommendation as if this were my child. And I suggest that you ask the examiner to do that as well, whoever that you have. Say, when you see when you write your recommendations, I need you to put yourself in my situation. If this were your child, what would you be recommending? And tell me, that this is what you would do, and make that recommendation in the report. Whether it relates to FAPE or not is irrelevant. Now, there's a lot of private schools that I go to, and for some reason the teachers keep thinking that they need to make recommendations having to do with FAPE and things like that too. So actually, I shouldn't have said that. We'll come, because that's not really part of this lecture. But it can muck things up, not for me, but it can muck things up for you. We don't have to make a recommendation about FAPE in a report and to make that distinction. Now, I think I skipped something here. I did. Okay. And in fact, when I write a report, it's rare that I'll ever say anything about FAPE in my report. If anything, when I do an IE, I may actually write in the report that my recommendations are made without deference to what FAPE is. And I'll write in there, they say, but these are the recommendations that I would make if this child were mine. However, whether a recommendation is FAPE is always a part of the IEP, but it's not necessarily something that I might say something about. So the examiner might not say whether they think their recommendation is FAPE also. Again, it just depends. When I talk about my recommendations, by the way, I'm rarely talking about placement. Placement, I always make an issue of FAPE. I'm talking about some of the other ancillary services that have to do with, that go into the IEP. Some of them which might be, for instance, medication, which is also not, I shouldn't say whether it's FAPE or not. I would not think that an offer of saying that I think a child needs to be medicated has anything to do with FAPE. I have no idea. I'll leave that up to the attorneys to argue over, but I try not to get into it. Now, it's a different situation in due process because FAPE is always a part of the due process. And I have to tell you that every one of my recommendations, the hearing officer is going to nail me on and ask me to come to an opinion as far as whether that's FAPE or not. And I have found personally that it's easier for me to, by the time due process rolls around, for me to make a decision whether I believe that each one of mine were referred to as FAPE or not than it is for me to try to wiggle out of. It's just easier for me to contemplate it and see and just come up with something definitive and say, no, Your Honor, I did not. This isn't something that the child has to have. It's something that I would do if it were my child. Oh, yes, this is something that child, I think, has to actually have, and without it, that they're not getting a free, appropriate public education. But I'm not going to bring that into rarely would I bring that into an IEP, unless there was some reason that I felt that my doing so was going to turn the IEP at that point, and there's no question, then I don't have any problem with it. But I'm not interested in laying everything out in front of an IEP, and I think Tim and Lynn both know, in my opinion anyway, that IEPs, for me to go to an IEP is often a waste of time because I just don't see them as resolving a whole lot. So I have a pretty cynical attitude of what IEPs are in general. So many things get resolved in mediation, and until it gets to that point, so many districts just aren't willing to go on the table. That's my personal experience. Each district can be different. Okay, moving on. Examiner's recommendations. I just wanted to give you a little bit of that. Placement decisions from my perspective, talking about placement. Or an examiner's perspective. The present levels drive the goals and objectives. The goals and objectives we know drive the placement. And that's very important. Why is that important? Because so many IEPs, when I look at the goals and the whole program, the IEP goals, the whole program is being dumbed down, by the district. And because of that, of course, the program winds up being a very watered-down program and your child doesn't make it anywhere. This is actually the level. I know that Lynn focused on the goals and objectives. Lately, about the last 5 IEPs that I've participated in, it's actually the present levels that have been the key element that has been able to turn something in the IEP, because the present levels were so dumbed down at that level, that the present levels were things that the child could already do. And when the parent brought in and said, wait a second, my child can do that, basically the district said, show me. And it was up to the parent to prove that the child was able to do that, which the parent in each of those instances was able to do because these particular parents had an ABA program, so they just had the ABA therapist do it while they videotaped and brought him back, called another IEP, and all the present levels were changed, which then made the goals and objectives very, very different at that point, and then also changed the level of service that the child had to have. But it doesn't start at the goals and objectives. It really starts at the present levels issues. So because of that, be prepared. We talked about it. Tim talked about it, and I did in the last one. Be prepared to be able to memorialize something on tape to be able to prove your point, because you will absolutely, absolutely, absolutely not be believed, because you just won't unless you can show it. Now, videos are, I'll tell you, pictures, truly, whoever came up with a picture is worth 1,000 words. Oh, that was me, I think. No, whoever came up with that one so many years ago, it's an understatement. One of my favorite IEPs was where I had digitized a videotape of the child that the parent had recorded when the child was, I think the child was 2 or 3 years old, and 4 years had passed. And now the child is in this program, and the teachers have had this child now for, that particular teacher had the child for about 2 to 3 years. And we're in the IEP meeting, and the parent, of course, is saying all the things that they think that they'd like to make progress on the child. And the teacher honorably says, Mrs. So-and-so, let's get real here. Your child hasn't made this such and such progress, is probably never going to, and has never been the way that you're telling me your child has been or what they're capable of. And with that, before the parent reached over and socked the teacher, we said, let's call a break. I set up the video recorder on my computer, and I played them what the child was like before the teacher ever got the child, when he was 2 or 3 years old, and the teacher cried when she saw the tape, because this child was more capable back then than the child was 4 years later. It was such a moving experience for everyone in the room that immediately the IEP team, they caucused with each other, which I always love, and then they gave the parent a non-public school, just folded, just because the video wasn't my evaluation, had nothing. It was just the videotape of what the child was able to do before they ever got to that school. It was amazing. So get a video camera if you don't have one. I got mine on eBay for $145, and it's an excellent one, so they're not that expensive. What I do to try to memorialize something for the IEP, for the report, is I ask parents to develop for me, alongside their ABA specialist, what I call a before and after list. What do I mean by that? These are examples that I'm going to be showing you that are from a literal one. This isn't contrived data that happened. So start with my headings are the headings that I use, but there are other headings that can be there as well. So literal IEP. Joe attended in October of 2005, specific pre-kindergarten school. By teacher reports, direct observations, Joe was aggressive, non-compliant, escaped. In March of 2006, he started actually a little bit earlier than March of 2006, his ABA program. But by that time, that's the date that the parent or the ABA specialist came down and broke that time out. I didn't break the times out. He was in a 40-hour-a-week program. In June of 2006, so it's not even a year had gone by, he was attending a typical preschool 5 days a week with an ABA 8. There's the learning trajectory that we talked about. Continuing along, some more examples. That switch over? No. Okay. October of 2005, Joe couldn't go to anywhere with the parent. The parent was totally housebound, was a prisoner in their own house because the kid would elope whenever they go anywhere. However, by June of 2006, all these things were accomplished. He was able to be with the parent and all that stuff for within 5 feet of the parent, stayed in stores, held the adult's hand, but could also verbalize his desires and wait for a desired object or activity for an extended period of time. That's home and community. And then I have a whole list under home and community. This isn't exhaustive. Just giving an example of maladaptive behaviors. In October of 2005, Joe was non-compliant about 19 times an hour. His teacher, autism-specific class, reports his behaviors were unmanageable. Now, less than a year later, Joe engages in non-compliance less than 1 time an hour in home therapy and in regular ed preschool. So this kid is in a regular ed preschool in less than a year, and he had less than, well, probably think the program started in March, so just February. So from February to June was all that happened. Talk about a learning trajectory that went like this, all of a sudden like that, is pretty incredible, just by the before and after list. Continuing, self-help, the same type of thing. Couldn't go to the bathroom, anything. He was playing in the toilet, etc. Less than a year later, he's totally independent. Toileting skills, social, emotional. Couldn't play even with his therapist. He could play with his therapist for about 5 minutes with full verbal prompting. That was not the home program therapist, by the way, school therapist. And then June of 2006, not only did he do that, but he was engaging in interactive play with peers, typical preschool for 45 minutes with minimal prompting from an aide. Before and after. I get this from the parent. I have the parent generate from all the data, the logbooks, etc., and when the ABA specialist, all the different things that were before and after. This was before they started the home program. This was what it looked like. They started the program somewhere in after this time. By March, this is what they were able to do, and then by June, that's when I wrote my report. That's what they were able to do. And so what that does is I'm trying to look at the learning trajectory to see if the program that they have going is working. And remember, I also said I wanted to know when the trajectory changed. So we're trying to look as scientifically as possible. Now, I will get the logbooks and take a look at this and verify some of this information. But if a parent were to say this type of thing in an IEP meeting, it's just the parent saying, when this is charted in my report like this, it's a very different, it's believed. What can I say? It's believed just by the mere function that I've charted it. And I validate it. Now, I'm honest. I validate that I got this from the parent, as well as the fact that I've then checked out what I could by looking at the logbooks. But I'm not going to read all the logbooks for each thing specifically. And it communicates. Because remember, what your task is, and I don't want to jump to a legal situation, but your task, if you're going to go to due process, isn't just to show prove that the district's program was inappropriate. You have to prove that your program was appropriate. And so here it is, right here. This is the data that starts showing that your program is appropriate. So if a hearing officer looks over to me and says, Dr. Perlman, how can you tell that the learning trajectory has changed? I could say, well, let's turn to pages blah, blah, blah of my report, and there it is. How do you know? Well, Your Honor, I didn't verify every single thing from the logbook, but I did verify randomly the different things along the chart, and they were right on the money. I'm going to ask it to hold. I popped you twice already. That's the second time, isn't it? Isn't that terrible? I'm just going to ask you to hold right until the end, if I can, on that. See that I'm rewarding behavior of a parent that just asked me the question out loud without raising their hand. I'm not a behaviorist. Okay. Now, where was I? Okay, we talked about the videos before and after. We've talked about the learning trajectory. That what I'm looking for, I'm really looking for that learning trajectory being changed when I do an evaluation. The other thing that I'm looking for is the following. When I do some testing, I want to know what the child's capabilities are. That we're talking about either by IQ or by you showing me on videotape or by demonstrating for me what it is that you think that your child could do. I'll look at all of it. So I can take actual numbers and I can take numbers that aren't actual. I mean, not numbers, but just show me. Just show the evaluator what is it that you can do. If your child, and many of the parents are absolutely incredible working with your children at home. If you work with your child, you've developed certain things, you know, and your child could read given whatever it is in format that you've prepared, that's okay. Bring it into the office. Tell the examiner you're going to be bringing in your own materials as well because you want to demonstrate a few things. We'd love it and show what you do. So, because I want to know what I want to have an idea of what your child is capable of because I want to match and see, especially if you do or don't have a home program, I still want to see does the capability match the trajectory. In other words, if your child is capable of this much, why is the learning trajectory only this much? And if it doesn't match, I want to know why it doesn't match. And then, of course, the next line is if it does match, I want to know since when. And that's what that chart was, partly what we just developed, what I just had talked about. I want to know when did the trajectory change. So here I see your child is capable of this much. And if I say, you know what, your child is learning it, your child's capabilities, the learning trajectory is great. Now I want to know, but when did the trajectory go like from there to there? And can I somehow empirically be able to document or derive when I think that learning trajectory has changed? So I know if it's your program that did it, if it's the diet that did it, if it's some sort of biomedical intervention that did it, or medication. So we have some sort of empirical way of trying to see when we've been able to change your child's learning. Okay, targeting placement. This is a little bit different than the last one that we talked about. When I talk about targeting placement, when I think about, okay, where should a child be placed, whether it's regular ed or in an SDC or some other type of program, I'm wanting to know, can a child be remediated of whatever deficits that they have? So even if the child, let's say the child is capable, however I determine what capable is, but they have some sort of deficit that needs to be remediated, or can the child's deficits be accommodated? I am not using accommodated in the legal term here, so this is the English translation of accommodate, and you'll understand what I mean as we talk about it. So I'm talking about the difference between being remediated and accommodated, and my reports will often show that, is what is it that should be remediated, what is it that should be accommodated. So with the learning disabled child, it's pretty simple to understand the difference. Remediation would be a processing deficit that we need to start remediating. So the process is, let's say, underlying dyslexic, whereas accommodation might be, if it's a reading deficit, might be books on tape. That would be something that I'm now accommodating them so they could participate in a regular ed classroom with their peers because I'm going to be giving them more things. I know that starts to bleed over in the definition of what a true legal accommodation is, but I'm not going there with that. So I want to know if they can be remediated to participate in a regular ed class, if they can be remediated to access the curriculum standards with or without content modifications. So those are the two things that I'm trying to look at when I think about remediation, because I don't want to waste your child's time if I were to think something different. I'm going to amplify on that in a minute. Through the services and recommendations, remediation and accommodation. So what am I talking about? What do I mean? What are the services that can be put in place in your IEP that will cover remediation and accommodation so that your child, if he can participate in a regular ed class? And if your child can participate in a regular ed class, there's still another factor, and that's then can we get your child to participate in the regular ed curriculum, modified or unmodified? So it's that type of a tiered system. And I say that because we already know that there's benefit to educating really all children, but especially children with autism alongside their regular ed peers. But that doesn't mean that I'm going to say, even if I were to recommend that, I still want to make a recommendation whether I think that your child can access the regular ed curriculum and whether it should be modified or not modified for them at the same time. And it does change placements depending on where that prediction is. But let's go back. Remediation. I do believe ABA home programs are remediation. We're remediating this individual to become part of the world. That's what we're trying to do. We want them to be able to participate in life and to be one of us, so to speak. And so it's a remediation. From a placement, it's a very restrictive level of placement because we're saying we want kids to be alongside regular ed peers, but now if we put them in a total home program, we pull them from school, there has to be a compelling reason for that. And there are compelling reasons for that with children on the spectrum. And so when I test, I'm looking for what those compelling reasons are. A couple of them are, these are probably the two biggies right here for me. which is, does the child have the mental capacity to be able to take in information? And I'm not talking about how they perform on an IQ test, because normally at this level, the child is relatively untestable. But they've shown me something that tells me that they actually have the capacity to take in information. It's about 99% of the people that I test that are on the spectrum. They have the mental capacity to take in information and utilize a home program. Now, this next one, though, is one of my biggest predictors. Do they have an ability for awareness? That at some point or other, they are accessing information in their environment. So it's not just a mental capacity in here, but their eyes aren't looking inward or stimming on something, that they're actually now taking in something that's going to be meaningful. And this comes about in the most unusual ways, and I'll give you a couple examples. I remember one of the first autistic children that I tested, and was a little bit older. I think at the time he was about 8 years old. He had wanted nothing to do with me. I can't imagine why. I'm a lot of fun to be with, but nonetheless, nothing to do with me, the testing, nothing. And he's, all over the place and, looking like this. And, I don't think he actually threw over the table of the testing things, but nonetheless, nothing to do with me. And I thought, oh boy, where is this going? And then finally, he grabs my hand, looks at me in the face, and motions me to come with him, and he takes me to the front door, and he opens and says, "Goodbye, Dr. Perlman." At that moment, I knew that he had the ability for awareness, and he knew what he was doing the whole time. He wanted me to leave, and he was able to do it so graciously, too, in the middle of the testing. Okay, and then, of course, there's the elopers. People that just elope, and they're trying to get up out of their chair and run, then they run, and it doesn't tell me anything. That's not necessarily the ability for awareness at all. But when they get up and elope, and they run, and then they pause, and they look back, and you see those horns come up out of their head, and that mischievous look, it is all over. They are caught, and they have an ability for awareness. And I'll tell you what, I've recommended more home programs based on those two things, that latter thing happening, I should say, than on anything else, because that tells me that this person wanted to engage me at that moment. It definitely has an ability, and now we just have to capture that and do something about it. And if I believe at that point that child is not benefiting, that needs the intensive program, which I probably would at that point, needs an intensive program, we need to now bring that child home, we need to give them the 25 plus hours a week, not including supervision, to amp up the intensity, to bring out this very factor. That's worth pulling someone from a school placement to do. No, you have to wait. I made everybody else wait. See, so she did a combination of both your methods. She raised her hand to wait for me, but she still called out. The question is what do I do with children that are untestable? I may cover that, so let's see first, and then I'll do it. No matter what the outcome is, truly, if I were a parent, well, I am a parent, but if I were now a parent and I had to make a decision on whether, someone asked me earlier about emptying their IRA accounts and doing whatever they can to do a child, it is true that in my experience, the amount of people that I've seen, I don't want to say recover, but been able to benefit so immensely from an intensive AB program, hands down, with what I know now, I would not be able to live with myself if I didn't give my child the benefit of a minimum of 3 to 6 months of intensive ABA work in the house program and just see what the outcome is. Because if there was nothing at all, and I spent the $6,000 to $8,000 per month doing that, it would be the best $6,000 to $8,000 a month that I spent, because I know that for the rest of my life I could live with myself without saying, gee, I wonder if I wish I could have or I should have, and could I have made the outcome different? Because then I would have known. I would get the best, who I consider to be the best ABA program that I could find, 3 to 6 months. I wouldn't even evaluate it until after that. In a 3 to 6 month, either 3 or 6 month interval, I'd look and say, do I need to continue this? Now this ties into what Lynn was asking me, which is, are there people that I could that I can't, that are just untestable to me? Well, yes, there are definitely people that are untestable to me, and there's still a reason for me to go and do the observations, to see the child who gives me those horns, that I could see the ability for an awareness, and to and to make those type of recommendations, and I should say to be able to predict whether the child would be successful or not, and give a parent an honest answer. So the child that I mentioned earlier, that the parent picked me up from the airport and told me that I had their life in his hands, and I did, that child was completely untestable, but showed me some of these things and the ability for awareness. And I still recommended to him that yes, if it takes you moving to China to get a job, move to China and get a job and take an equity loan on your house, because I do believe that in 3 to 6 months that you're going to see a difference. And it has to do with those things right there. And I would do it. I would not have made that recommendation if I didn't believe that. However, if I were the parent, irrespective of what the doctor said, I would still want to give that to my child, because I have to live with myself for the rest of my life. And I could do that if I knew that I gave my child that opportunity. Okay. Again, our goal here in the ABA program, or in any intervention, but really when I'm thinking of the intent, remember I said recommendations from an evaluator's perspective, I'm wanting to know, how can we help this child join the world? We're eliminating maladaptive behaviors that's pushing them away or that's stopping them from being able to attend. We're trying to improve their ability to attend, and we're teaching them how to interact. But what we're wanting to do in the end result is we want to put them on this track for social reinforcement, because if we can make them part of the world, we assume that the world is a good place and that there's benefit to being a part of the world, and we want to put them on that track for social reinforcement, so that they'll have a reason then to continue to be aware and out there and being involved and interacting with the world. So that was some of the services that I want now. So we're talking about services for remediation. That was the services for remediation, ABA remediation. We're remediating a learning disability with the ABA. The learning disability is a social language communication disorder, right? And so the main service is the ABA intervention at the home. That's what we just went over. Other remediation techniques, of course, are the typicals. I call the typicals, is the speech, OT, and PT. It's physical therapy or APE, occupational therapy, speech language. Atypical is remediating for some of the processing deficits. And this is often missed with the children with autism, because the focus is so much on placement with an ABA program that we forget that, gee, these are also typical human beings, and human beings have typical processing disorders. A child, I will often find, it's interesting, I'll often find with children with autism, they will have a combination of either autism plus dyslexia, and true dyslexia, or autism plus hyperlexia, where their reading is incredible. And at an early age, before kindergarten, like 3 or 4 years old, they're able to read incredibly. So it's hyperlexia. They don't necessarily understand what they're reading, but they love words. They love words. I remember one of the first hyperlexic children that I tested, again, autistic with hyperlexia, was when on his ABA breaks, whenever we give him a break, what would he do? Go to the board and just write words. And he loved Disney. Hi-ho, 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 hi-ho. I wrote all of them. And he was only 4 years old at the time. Spelt it flawlessly, too. But continuing, so processing deficits. What do I mean about remediating processing deficits? Attention is the biggie to be able to remediate. Now, attention is often misunderstood. I mentioned earlier that when a teacher says, oh, this child can't attend, and I said, that is so meaningless. That's such a meaningless statement to me, because it doesn't communicate anything that this child can't attend, and because it's not a unified construct. Attention involves several key elements that come together, and those key elements affect many cognitive processes. So what do I mean? Oops. Let's see if it stays. Okay, it does. Okay, good. So 4 key elements that go into attention. One is just general alertness. Is the person awake? Are they now ready to take in information? So it's class, all of a sudden now they're alert and they're there. That's the first piece of attention. The second piece, though, is selective focus. Does the individual know what to focus on? So the child with autism usually is pretty alert. That's why they're going from task to task and wandering and things like that. So it's not that part of attention, general attention. So we wouldn't want to intervene there. But it's selective focus. Does the child know what to attend to in their environment? Can they distinguish between what's relevant and what's irrelevant? I wish I brought some attention tasks, because you'd love them. They're some of our favorite tasks in neuropsych. They're a lot of fun. But anyways, then filtering. Not only can the person understand what's relevant to attend to from what's irrelevant to attend to, but can they filter out the distractors that are going on? So in this event, when you think about it. The true process of attention would be like this. If I were to close my eyes and I'm in the middle of a cocktail party, and without moving a muscle, I can go and listen to that conversation over there, and I could move around the room in a literal 360. But it's a remarkable feat when you think about it, in that nothing has changed externally. The only thing that's changed is my direction of where I'm going to attend to as I'm moving about the room. And you kind of filter out different things. And of course, we already know that, especially children with sensory integration disorder have trouble filtering things. You know, right now, until I just thought about it, I wasn't hearing the air conditioning unit that's going on back here. Now I can hear it again because all of a sudden I attended to it. We don't hear the fluorescent lights in the room typically because we can filter that out as we're attending to something else and things like that. But it's an attention process. And then there's the maintenance. So after we're alert, we know what to focus on. We're now filtering out the distractors. You think everything is great. There's something called cognitive shift that happens. So after all those things are there, does the person all of a sudden just lose it? It's kind of like trying to hold on to a greased watermelon. You got them, and then you think you have it, and then whoop, it's out of your hands, and things like that. And this one, the best way to describe it, reminds me of my little min pin. You know, it wants to grab the frisbee, grab the frisbee, grab the frisbee, or the ball, and I go to throw it, and it goes, and then it runs somewhere else because it totally lost everything that you thought that, God, this was so perfect, he was going to run and catch it, but totally lost attention on what it was that he wanted. Didn't even get distracted, just, and just walks away somewhere else. So it's not a distractibility, it's the maintenance issue. It's this shift that happens. And so when we talk about attention, the reason why I spent so much time on the interventions are different for each one. So we talk at things like brain gym that we talk about in school, some of the movement exercises, or even Simonis or therapeutic listening that we're going to talk about in a second. Some of those, or interactive metronome, a lot of those have to do with the alertness level. Now, is the person ready to take in information? If you work out of the gym, you know that sometimes before you do a power rep, you want to real quickly do a kind of a light set because it tells your muscles, okay, get ready to take it because we're going to now go for the power one. And a lot of those programs do that with alertness. It's kind of, they get your brain ready to just, okay, now you're ready, you've done the bilateral exercises and things like that, now you're ready to input information. And we do that there, whereas others, such as Fast for Word, for instance, has a lot to do with filtering. It talks about, well, actually selective focus, how to selectively focus on the specific phonemes and phonemic awareness, and then does a little bit with filtering and things like that. So a lot of our interventions and processing interventions target different areas. Well, we're going to do those right now. So sound therapies, there's basically 3 or 4 of them that are good ones. You have Simonis and therapeutic listening. They're similar. There's an overlap between the programs, and you actually have to talk to an occupational therapist that specializes in these types of things, and they can tell you the fine distinctions between Simonis and therapeutic listening. I have reviewed it with them several times, but I know that if I were to regurgitate it now, I'd be wrong, which I wouldn't have a problem doing except they're videotaping, so it's memorialized forever, right? So I can't be wrong. But therapeutic listening is not the listening program. Most of the OTs that do these, they do not like the listening program, whatever that is, and I don't know why, but nonetheless, they say it's not a good program, but therapeutic listening. But these are this is filtered music. Both of them have to do with filtered music to get at different things. That's about the best way I could say it. So I don't know if you're like me at all, but if I'm on the phone and I have a difficulty, especially someone tries to tell me their email address, they're trying to spell it, and I can no longer hear that distinction between the F and the S. Did you say it's an S? Did you say it's an F? You can't really hear it. That's the phonemic awareness. And the truth is that these programs remediate that type of process that allows people to now listen, and they're able to hear it with much more ease, and things like that, including someone who's as old as me. I know that's hard to believe, but the OT says that it would work. Aerobics. This actually is a scene from the aerobics. There's a couple things that I like about aerobics. One is that it's one of the few programs that it's very hard to teach remediate sequencing, sequential processing with visual format. It's very hard to make a task that's literal and make it visual, because as soon as we make it visual, the eye wants to take the whole thing in at one time and throw it into a right brain task, and as soon as it does that, it's no longer sequencing. Even those cards that you had to put in the right order that I showed earlier, it's no longer a sequencing task because you have to understand the whole before you put it together, so it's a very right brain task. But this is a sequencing task. What they do is they play the drums, and they'll even have a baboon that says, "Can you do this?" And the baboon will hit certain things in a particular order, and now you have to take the mouse and click those drums in that same order to do it. It's very interesting because there's no pattern, and as long as there's no pattern, then you can't come up with. It then keeps it in the left brain. It's a left brain task. But anyways, those I use. They weren't necessarily developed for attention, but they work well with attention. And then the same thing with some of the movement therapies: Brain Gym, Interactive Metronome, and Intercept. I don't know that you'll find Intercept at too many places. You can go online to see if it's offered in your area. It's not offered in San Diego, but it's offered over there in Irvine, California. We have that. Interesting program. I haven't seen the research on it. The schools like these, I try to get the teachers to incorporate Brain Gym in their regular, just in their regular daily activity. So if you have a child that can't pay attention, the Brain Gym is great for everybody. And in fact, I'm surprised that airline stewards and stewardesses don't learn Brain Gym because they can get everybody to do it, especially on long flights. But we have a couple private schools in San Diego that all the teachers are trained in Brain Gym, and before and after every class, everybody gets it. It doesn't matter whether the person needs it or not. Or if the teacher sees that people are starting to fade out, etc., they say, "Oh, you know what, class, let's come up and let's do some cross crawls," and they do some cross crawls and things. And again, it's to make somebody more alert, to be prepared and ready to learn. Now, when I say others, the reason why I put the others and I categorize them like this is because Fast for Word was developed for that phonemic awareness that I was talking about a moment ago, but I find it to be very useful for attention. It is so boring, though. I had one kid say that if we continued to make him, that he was definitely go attend the program, that he was going to kill himself. And I actually believed him, too. I tried it. I thought, oh, God, if I had to sit here for 2 hours and 15 minutes during my summer, for 6 weeks straight, 5 days a week, I would probably want to kill myself, too. But interestingly enough, though, most kids on the autistic spectrum like it. So, well, I shouldn't say like it. When I say like, with an autistic spectrum kid, it often means tolerate it. They will tolerate the program. PACE is very unusual, and again, I don't know how much research has been. It was actually an older program. I don't know how much research has been generated recently. The concept was interesting. It was developed by the combination of a speech therapist, occupational therapist, and vision therapist. They incorporate some vision therapy, some occupational therapy, and some speech therapy into the program. That's why I have it on other, because it does do attention, but it actually does more as well than just attention. And let's see. So we did attention. Let's talk about dyslexia real quickly. Classic dyslexia and visual dyslexia. Classic dyslexia, and this is, if we were going to do a research on dyslexics, they would have to have these two components to do the research on it. They have to have a combination of difficulties with phonemic awareness, so the difficulty being able to hear the basic phonemes and the sound, which is what makes it difficult for them to decode words. And they have to have a deficit in what's called speed of lexical access. It's also called rapid autonomic naming or rapid serial naming. So it's not good enough, we talk about flashcards, it's not good enough to get someone to memorize something. So what's this word? And the kid says on, very nice. What's this word? And, very nice. What speed of lexical access is, how fast can somebody bring it out of memory? So if we want to look at speed of lexical access, we take those things, what's this word, what's this word, what's this word, what's this word, what's this, this. And we want to see how fast they can bring something out of memory, not just words. So we could take objects from a brush, a comb, a spoon, just normal objects, and you'd be surprised when people that have this problem, they can't, yes, they know what a brush looks like, but they can't bring it out of memory rapidly enough. And what happens when you have this combination, you do have dyslexia and you have difficulty with reading comprehension especially. This is reading comprehension right here, because when someone can't bring it out of memory rapidly, long-term memory rapidly, then you'll find that they read like this and that's how they read. And if they read like that, it causes disfluency, and the disfluency affects reading comprehension. So there needs to be a fluency by the way somebody gets something out of memory, and that's what speed of lexical access is all about. So when you hear, when a speech teacher says, a speech language therapist, a pathologist will say that he has a dysnomia, or he has difficulty being able to access his vocabulary and words that he has. So he's always thinking and stumbling over his words and things like that. That's also speed of lexical access. So it's there as difficulty retrieving it rapidly from memory. Now, that's different than visual dyslexia. Oh, well, see, I did it differently. Classic dyslexia is remediated by, Linda Mood Bell has several programs that also remediate phonemic awareness, and so is Fast for Word was actually developed for that. But the newest one is something called RAVE-O, and you can look it up on the internet. That it's put out by Tufts University. It was by the research behind it is excellent, and it was a research grant anyway in Tufts through Tufts University through their Speech and Language Reading Center. And it's for very young children. So sadly, starting at about age 10 to 12, the materials, it'll help with kids that are older, but the materials won't benefit them. It's really for the preschool, kindergarten, first grade, right in their level. The most is RAVE-O. And that's the only program that's out there that has been research identified to be able to remediate speed of lexical access, because speed of lexical access and finding words has been evasive to us for many, many, many years. We just have not been able to do it, where there's many programs to remediate phonemic awareness. Okay, vision therapy, visual dyslexia. Really, vision therapy is one of the best ways. PACE gets at it a little bit, but vision therapy is what you look at for visual dyslexia. What am I talking about, visual dyslexia? So, this is a visual spatial task, and it's a task that we can give to starting about age 3. And it's difficult to communicate to 3-year-olds on what it is that we want, because we're looking at the 2 arrows that, of course, we don't tell them this, but that are pointing to the bullseye. If continued along the same trajectory are going to hit the bullseye. It's a very spatial task because your eye looks at it all at one time. And then as the items get more difficult, that's just the sample item, we take the arrows away a little bit more, and we say which 2 are, of course, are hitting the bullseye. This is a very, very right brain visual spatial task. When I find visual dyslexia, kids don't necessarily have this type of difficulty, because this isn't the type of scanning that's found in reading, because your eye is still taking in all the information at one time. It's this information that's involved in more. It's called what I call visual scanning discrimination. So if I say, there's a soccer ball and the dog, I need you to find all the times where the soccer ball and the dog are next to each other in that order. Soccer ball first, then dog. Are you ready? Go. And I time you. Now, it's an easy task. The task was developed for processing speed, because processing speed is that given an unlimited amount of time, we would expect everybody to get 100%, right? But when we put you in a speeded condition, now all of a sudden we're testing something, getting something out rapidly. And to me, it's visually overwhelming, but I know I have visual discrimination difficulties. But what's interesting is to watch people do this task, because what they'll do is they'll start, go to the end, and then come to the end here, and then they'll end up skipping lines accidentally. Or they'll wind up doing the same line twice, or they'll do something compensatory like this. I'll see a person come to the end of the line here, and they'll hold their finger here while they hold their finger on the next line, and then they check themselves before they go. That already tells me that they have a visual discrimination problem / scanning problem, but they just learned to compensate for it. Because if they're doing it here, you know that they're doing it when they're reading. We already know that they're doing it because on this particular task. So that's discrimination. I know that there's a question there, but we still have to hold it for a second. And that's the visual dyslexia. Yes, we'll test the reversals of letters and things like that, but this is the part that's really amenable to vision therapy. Okay, I mentioned, now that's remediation, accommodations. Essential standards versus regular standards. I've had a flurry of these lately. I don't know why in the IEP meetings. I go to an IEP, and of course the goals are really dumbed down and everything else, or I'll listen to how what's being taught, and I'll say, gee, that doesn't sound like the child has access to the curriculum. And the answer I get is, oh yes, we're giving him all of the essential standards. The key there is essential. If someone says they're either getting the standards or they're not getting the standards, but what we're getting lately is we're giving them the essential standards. So they're not getting the whole curriculum. They're getting portions of the curriculum, enough that may or may not allow them to take the different exit exams for high school, because they're going to not get all the different parts of history. They're just going to get the things that are essential. Oh, I'm trying to hold my tongue on this, but I can't. Oh, I don't know, like the day that we vote George Bush out of office. I didn't say it. Just the essential historical facts. Okay, still accommodation, aid versus consultation versus training. It's an important one. We talked earlier about how when I said one-on-one aid, you have to be careful here in a one-on-one aid. Why are you doing it? When I recommend a child with autism go to the classroom with a one-on-one aid, I'm a regular ed. I believe that they can access, I believe that there is one of two things happening. One is that there is benefit to that child participating in the regular ed class for as long as we can keep that child in regular ed. And so we're putting a one-on-one trained aide, ABA aide, to help facilitate that from that happening. The second reason why I would put a child in class, regular ed class with an aide, is because I believe that they may be able to access the full curriculum. If so, I know there was a question about what I was saying about a trained aide versus untrained aide. I don't want that aide responsible for educating the child. An ABA aide is responsible for providing the corrective experiences for that child in a social environment whenever they can, as well as helping the child to participate in the classroom with all of their peers. But the other type of aide is there just to facilitate so that the teacher can teach the child. I don't want the aide teaching the child. If the child needs to benefit, if I believe a child can be in access to full curriculum but needs a smaller program, school, in order to do that, almost always then, unless the school has a wonderful program that they can make a large classroom small, they have to go to a non-public school that can do that. I need you to understand this because it's a key difference. If I believe as an examiner that your child can access the regular curriculum, your child can't be in an SDC. Almost invariable, special day class, even if it's with peers that are essentially neurotypical, meaning only have learning disabled. Because in an SDC, I've not visited one yet where they give all the curriculum. Your child won't get all the curriculum. So there's a little bit of a difference here. Here you have a child can access the regular ed curriculum, but even with an aide to a regular ed classroom, I don't believe that he's going to be able to because his needs are too great. But I say he has the mental capacity, if given the right program to access the regular ed curriculum. Now you have to change the program. That's the way that the law reads. And it's something that the districts are having a hard time dealing with. It's a recent situation, but Tim could deal more on that more specifically. But it's an important distinction between essential standards and the curriculum. So what am I talking about? Well, one more thing, we'll talk about consultation and training. Consultation is, I have seen very recently, actually, a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful program, regular ed school, kid was put in there, but the district recognizing with a hand twist that they weren't able to meet this kid's needs, that they sought outside consultation and paid for an NPS or NPA, non-public agency, ABA agency, to come on in and consult with the teacher 6 hours to 10 hours a month, depending on what it is. They would come in the classroom, do their thing, train the aide to be the supervisor, not the supervisor, train the aide to do what the aide needed to do for the social experience for the child, and it worked wonderfully. So it's just another iteration that sometimes what we need is not just an aide in the classroom. What we need is an NPA or an agency to come on in and provide the supervision and the experience, to train the teacher, to train the aide, and then to supervise it and maintain it on an ongoing basis. And just with that alone, then they're able to use a district aide. They don't have to use an ABA aide to do that because there's an agency that's training and supervising that aide that's outside. You have outside eyes in that agency. So for a little bit more money, the district is able to then put a regular ed child in, a child with autism into a regular ed class. Training, that's all I want to say about training. Training is a difficult one in general that parents will have to argue. I want to talk about technology, hardware, software, and then we're done as far as the accommodations go. Technology is wonderful, and I don't know why it's used so little. Well, I do know why it's used so little, and one of the reasons is I have yet to go walk into a classroom where a teacher or the classroom or whoever, the aides, have accurately used PECs. I can't imagine what they would do with technology. But it's true, it's true. It's just amazing to see. You walk into a class and you say, okay, I thought you were using PECs. Oh, we are. Where's everyone's PECs books? Oh, they're in the closet, Like, oh, that's helpful. The kid knows to go to the closet to pull out his book. Anyway, the reason why technology fails, and you'll hear it all the time, that, oh, we tried that, it doesn't work. Well, you know why it doesn't work. It doesn't work the same reason that the PECs books don't work. It's because they're not trained in it and they don't know how to do it. Technology is wonderful. One of my favorite recommendations, there's an SLP, speech language pathologist, who also does assistive technology evals, is for her to come on in and to do that. And that she just comes in there literally with all the, I can't say facilitative communication, with all the augmentative communication devices, And it's just a wonderful thing for the kids to be able to have. And then she changed the teachers, and it's integrated into the classroom. Now the kid can start participating. And I'll tell you, all the kids in the classroom love that device as well. And the kid becomes the most popular one in the class at the same time. It's really great. There's a lot of hardware, a lot of software to be able to help us in this thing. I'm going to run through some of them. We know about the hardware, some of the hardware. Word processors, augmentative communication devices. There's scanning pens, and they're not all created equal, that we can scan a page just with a pen, swiping a pen, and it will read it back to us. So you don't have to have this huge device that you're carrying with you. You can just put it in your pocket, and it reads. This is for reading. There's the Win and Kurzweil, read out loud and read naturally. I went to one school, it was really wonderful, where they have the teacher writes on the whiteboard, of course, and at the end of the thing, she hits the button for print, and the whiteboard prints, and then she hands the lesson out to everybody. And also, every single classroom has its own scanner, and the kids just naturally just get up when they can't read something or it's too hard for them. They get up and they put it in the scanner, and the Win system ends up capturing it and converts it to a readable text, and then they take that file back to their computer, and now it reads the text to them. And they could stick their whole book in there if they want, and just reads the whole thing, scans it all, and converts it into words. It's a wonderful program. I don't know why we don't use it and put it on our iPods. Somebody should talk to Apple. And of course, then there's just software devices. Read out loud. Read naturally is a little bit different. It's a whole program, and it falls somewhere between remediating processing and tutoring, because it does help with reading speed. But the kid has to know how to read read words in order to benefit from read naturally. Read out loud, of course, is exactly what it says. You can find some, but not all of these programs on a website, which you probably are familiar with, called donjohnston.com. Write out loud is for writing and co-writer. Draft builder. So co-writer is, well, we don't have time to explain each one. If somebody has a question afterwards, I can talk to them because I see that we're out of time. I do want to make a comment about Dragon Professional because it gets such bad press. The Dragon, naturally speaking, is a poor program. The expensive iteration of it, Dragon Professional or Dragon Medical, however, is not a poor program. And if you're ever going to try your child on a word recognition software, or yourself, by the way, don't even think about Dragon, naturally speaking, go right for the professional version because the differences are pretty great, and the speech engine isn't the same and things like that. It's an excellent program if you have a little bit of patience and you buy a good microphone. Okay, and the last two is Solo and Inspiration. The others were reading and writing. These are kind of graphic organizers. They do more than just a little bit of reading and writing, but they help organize thoughts. And again, these two, rather than taking the time now, donjohnston.com, and you can go in there and read about them. But some of these things, I write these into my educational evaluations. Your examiner that you interview, you could ask them how much they know about some of the remedial strategies and some of the software and hardware that's available for your child, because that might dictate who you might want and who you might not want. I know that we are right on my schedule. Since we started late, I ended right here. I know that there are several questions. I will field those questions during the break, which is happening right now. Right? What? Oh, there's an announcement? Okay. So, whatever. Someone is coming up to override me. How's that?
What we're going to do is we're going to take a short break. We're going to ask that you take a look at the next section. That would be section 7, Case Studies, Advanced Strategy. A lot of the stuff that we started with on page 45 through 49, we've already gone through. We're happy to field questions, but a lot of the stuff would be somewhat redundant. So we're going to have you do is read the 16 common and unlawful responses at IEPs. Be prepared to ask questions. And we also want you to read the case studies. And we'll be back here in about 15 minutes? 3:30, so about 15 minutes.
But
Yeah.
I'll stay up here for the people that had some questions that had for me. I'll answer them for you just coming up.
Now, if you'll notice, if you look on page, we can turn to page 59, case study number 3. We did not spot the issues for you. That's some homework for our participants. We'd like you to try to, if you're willing to volunteer, and let's try to get these issues spotted. So we'd like you to practice doing the analysis. So we did the issue spotting for you in the first two cases, but we did not spot the issues on the third case. So we'll go over those issues when we return from the break. So we're going to